This was an interesting conversation I had with Stever Robbins. Yes, Stever with an R at the end of it. And Stever's a guy I met through networking. And we've started to talk to one another on a weekly basis because we saw something in one another that I thought and he thought made us interesting people to be connected to. This is an example of the power of networking that I want to illustrate to you in this fairly wide ranging, almost 20-minute conversation that we had. And we were already talking when at one point I said, I want to start recording this. So it was his account. Could you hit the record button on Zoom and send it to me afterwards? He said, sure. And this is part of the conversation that we had. Now, Stever is MIT, Harvard Business School, exceedingly smart, and has a lot of ideas. The point of this is also to talk about the power of networking. So, yes, there's going to be interesting information for you, interesting opinions for you to evaluate. And I'm using this as an illustration of the power of networking that can help you develop relationships with people outside of your normal sphere of relationship that can help you expand into other areas and other opportunities. So this is a conversation I had with Stever. Hope you enjoy it. I'll have a link to his LinkedIn profile in the show notes. And meanwhile, let's get going.
So I think this is something that really just isn't recognized nearly enough. There are two phases to a corporation. The first phase is the startup phase. And in the startup phase, the principal problem is that you're looking for some benefit that you can provide the market, a market that wants that benefit and is willing to pay for it, and an operational model that can deliver that benefit to that market in a way that actually makes money, that has money left over, which we call profit. And one of the things about companies in early stages, right, is it's kind of hard to tell what's profitable and what isn't because the company doesn't have established systems and all that. But basically, you're looking for, I have a widget, I can sell you the widget. It cost me $5 to make the widget, you'll pay $10 for it. So I now have $5. That's not actually profit, that's gross margin. We're going to skip the detailed accounting stuff. But basically, that's the money that I have to use to both run the business and collect a profit. And if in fact you do your cost allocation right, then you know how much of your headcount expense you want to charge against each product. But at the end of the day, as a startup, you're just looking for something you can deliver to a customer that they will pay enough for to pay for what it costs you to make it, and a little bit more for profit. And then you struggle around, and then finally you find something. You're like, wow, there's this widget that costs us $5 to make. People will pay $10 for it, and let's go do it. Once you have that, so up until that point, what you need to do is learn very rapidly. You need to control costs because since you don't have something that can create a profit yet, you're going to run out of money or whatever you're using to fund the business. You don't even know who to hire. So what you really want to hire is you want to hire people who can help you do that experimentation, who can do rapid prototyping, etc. Like, there's this kind of mix of very creative people. And by the way, the company is small. And because it's small, that means you need generalists because the same person who's doing your customer support is also doing your accounting. And you need people who can kind of do all that. Then you discover that magic formula that lets the company grow.
Magic formula?
Well, the formula of the thing that you're delivering, who the market is, and the operational model that it takes to produce and deliver that. That's the magic formula. It's that little piece. At that point, it's all about scale. It's if I can sell Jeff a widget for $10 that cost me $5 to produce, now I want to find 1 million Jeffs, and I want to find that million Jeffs and sell them 1 million widgets. When you're scaling, you don't want that same skill set that you had up until this point in the entrepreneurial game. Actually, what you need is a different skill set now. Now you don't want generalists who are going to go around thinking creative ideas and trying 1,000 experiments. Now you want people who can take this one thing and scale it to be big. Scale is a whole different set of activities than the activities of finding that thing in the first place. And when it comes to scale, it's things like how do you design, if you're a manufacturing company, you start to get into logistics and distribution channels. And how do you design a system to scale where you used to have an accounting system that happened in one person's head and one spreadsheet on their computer, and now you need 5 accountants because you have so many transactions and customers to process, etc. You actually need systems to support all of that and to get and to grow the quantity of stuff going through that. And then you so I said 2 phases. There's really kind of a third phase. And then the third phase is, okay, we're big and huge chunks of the business now we're just turning the crank. We have systems that can handle the scale where we're at. And now we just need people who want to come in and go, you know what, I'm just going to sit down with my part of the accounting system every day and run through the stack of papers on my desk. I don't want to design new systems. I don't want to think about the 4 cost codes that haven't been invented. I don't want to invent I just want to sit down and run that. For that phase of the company, you need a lot of people who are very procedurally oriented, who enjoy procedure and who enjoy having a set routine and doing the same thing over and over and over, which would drive the people at the early phases of the company to suicide. The idea of coming in every day and doing the same thing every day. It's just completely different kinds of people. And what I find is that companies don't recognize that they require different kinds of people for these different kinds of things. So you end up with a large company that has scaled and they have this giant replicable process that does this thing. And they say, why aren't people innovating? And the answer is because innovators would go nuts at your company, right? Anyway, yeah. So,
and what I'm hearing you talk about is large institutions generally, or established organizations, which is what I was really speaking to, which is the type of firm that does transformation projects. Because what's the transformation project? It's really taking all those ideas that are in people's heads and codifying them so that an idiot can do them. And it's transformation sounds so wonderful. Now, we're going to transform all of this. It's going to be great, but it isn't. It's I'm pressing the button on the cash register.
Right.
That's all it is.
It's a slightly different cash register now. But
of course,
yeah.
Well, I'm talking about the mechanics of pressing the cash register. I'm not talking about the income stream. I'm just talking about, okay, I have to press this button to enter the price, and then this one for the sales tax, and then hit enter, and I know how much to charge. Those people go crazy in startups. And it's the reason why, most people, when they're young, like, kids in school, like really young kids, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, so excited, passionate, everything's interesting. And then somewhere along the line, they get the idea of shut up, do what we tell you to do, regurgitate a bunch of facts when we tell you to do that, or else. And they get moved up the food chain. You may be a different person than this, obviously, but a lot of people are raised that way. We're going to train you for the factory. And it's the information factory, but it's a factory nonetheless.
That was how public school got its start, wasn't it?
Right. Preparing people for factories, yes.
Yeah. No, it's, I do find that very interesting, especially because I watched my nephew grow up and I watched the changes in his thinking as he grew up. And it was very, very clear that he just checked out at a certain point where, now what's interesting is he checked out for a little bit of the opposite reason. He stayed, he wanted to do things and school couldn't keep up with him. So he was told he was gifted and all this stuff, right? Not a big surprise because that seems to happen in our family. But whereas I was told I was gifted and I was then given admission to a gifted children's program that challenged me and whatever, he was told he was gifted, but there were no gifted children's programs and he was in a school system that was just like, whatever. So his decision was to check out of it and basically do the minimum necessary to pass. So he passed with all Ds, which of course, the part he wasn't particularly smart about is when you have all Ds, it limits your options for things like college. But he decided he didn't want to go to college. He started a little business and we'll see how it goes.
It's funny. I was one of those gifted kids in New York City public school systems. And yes, they had programs, but they were, okay, you got to get a good grade. We're going to teach you about American history today for the next hour. And there was nothing gifted about this, except they threw more information at you faster.
Oh, ours were our gifted program was very cool. We had like experimental things. We would design our own, our own math curriculum. It was very cool.
Yeah. And when I speak from my perspective of, coming up the ranks, as you will, in the school system, and then being brought into the corporate factories. And for
Right.
me, it was such a novelty when I got to a recruiting firm because this was entrepreneurial. It was fast paced. The slang in sales is you eat what you kill, and no production, no revenue. So you learn very fast to start thinking creatively to attract people to you who, shall we say, you're beating out other people to fill jobs. But for those that I was speaking of, it's why employee engagement is as low as it is in the United States at 32%. And that's still the highest in the world.
Wow. It's almost like people aren't actually built to be mechanical cogs.
Go figure. It's amazing.
Oh man, yeah. Well, the reason that I brought up the different phases of a business a few minutes ago is in order to create a business like a Gillette that can service a market that large, as large as the razor blade market, and produce 1 billion razor blades, each one to exacting specifications every single time, you need an entire set of manufacturing processes and systems that
Absolutely.
just do as close to possible exactly precisely that formula, that manufacturing formula that produces the exact thing that can be sold for the exact price. And there really is kind of a problem that people are still a big piece of that. Now, our economic system, and this gets into a little bit to philosophy. I happen to have a belief that our economic system has developed under the assumption that it requires all of everyone to work in order to deliver enough products and services for us to have a good life. And that is so core and fundamental to the economy that we just take it for granted, except for the fact that industrialization and mass production actually changes that equation. Now, people love to hand wave and they say, well, look, no matter how many people we put out of jobs because of technology, everyone still seems to stay employed. And I'm like, yes, because humans need to survive. And when they end up unemployed, they will find some way to invent a job for themselves. That doesn't mean there is actually fundamental demand that always increases with every technological innovation. What it means is that people get increasingly desperate. So, now they're willing to sign up for Amazon Turk and to be an Uber driver and a Lyft driver at below a living wage. That doesn't mean that jobs magically appear when we have technological advancement, except that because our economy requires that, we invent a lot of that stuff. But and we also do things like we say, okay, we have to produce 1 billion Gillette razors. Instead of automating everything completely, even though we have the technology, let's keep a bunch of people in the process, because we have no other way of getting money to people. And I don't know. It's a complex system. It needs to go through a phase change. It needs to stop being a people-centric thing, and it needs to actually become a production-centric thing, I believe. Except that if we do that, we put people out of business, and we're not willing to create a social safety net or any way to continue to get money to people. So we either we need to keep people in the process. Also, we need to keep people in the process for hierarchy and psychological reasons, and the whole return to office. The whole return to office thing to me is a great example of that. You have a bunch of elderly white men strutting around in expensive suits going, people must return to the office. And you say, really? Given that you just had your 2 highest profit years ever with a completely remote workforce, what actual justification is there? And they say, oh, culture. I'm like, by culture, you mean you want to be able to walk around and feel powerful. Because when you're sitting in your underwear wearing, just a dress shirt because no one can see you in a Zoom meeting, you don't feel powerful anymore because you're just one of several little boxes on the screen, and people are checking out because frankly, you're not interesting enough to hold their attention. Like, and people pretend all this shit doesn't go on. I'm like, look at Jamie Dimon talk. Look at David Solomon or whoever was who recently did a big RTO. These are not people who care about substance. These are people on a power trip. you
Well,
know?
I'll go an extra step. The political class wants people in the office because one of the issues, for example, in New York, is New York City gets a lot of revenue from commercial real estate.
Mm,
And
right,
I look at commercial real estate in New York, and there's no justification for it right now. And
right,
there's a push to get people back in the office because all those delis are going out of business or have gone out of
right.
business. The city isn't getting commercial real estate taxes to the degree to which they did before. No one's going to restaurants. No one's going to shows. Movie theaters are first starting to come
Yeah,
back, but bankruptcies are real close. I think Regal is close to a bankruptcy, the largest movie chain in the country. So you start looking at this from an economic perspective, and it's not just simply the power trip, it's the political trip that basically says we need the money.
right, right.
And from an
And
individual standpoint, I see no justification for return to office. I do understand why they want to get in hybrid, but hybrid's stupid unless you're going to mandate we have everyone in the office on Thursdays, just to pick a
right,
day at random, because otherwise there's some people in the office, some people working remotely. What are you accomplishing?
yeah. Well, it's also, I mean, the economic argument is actually a very good one, I think, except for the fact that I don't believe in forcing people to expose
Me either.
themselves to potentially deadly disease. Um, and that economic argument is also related to a larger thing, which is right. The small businesses have gone out of business during COVID, but the large ones, the Amazons of the world, have the war chest to survive.
Mhm.
And to me, having those corner delis go out of business is also an issue of quality of culture and neighborhood and living
Mhm.
environment. Although one could argue that if the only thing happening in downtown New York is commerce, and commerce doesn't need downtown New York, that maybe we should find a way for those. Maybe what we should be doing is looking for ways to get those delis to move out to residential neighborhoods, instead, where people will still walk down and visit them. But it may actually be a positive thing for the human race if the downtowns die. The problem with that theory, or the problem with that in practice, is that if all those delis go out of business, those same people aren't going to start the delis up somewhere else. It's going to be
Right.
the chains that come in. And so we're going to end up with even more homogenized, more big chains, which at least I think I think those just completely kill culture, ambiance, neighborhood, anything. Why in the world would I want to go to another Best Buy? You know, or it's like great. I've been to a Best Buy, been there, done that. Now that I've been there and done that, you know, like I actually want some variety in my life, not for market reasons, not because I think I can get a lower price. I can get a lower price by ordering from China and bypassing everything, but because most of our culture is oriented around areas of commerce. That's the way the human race has grown up. And and the internet and mass production and chains have already gone a huge amount of the way towards destroying that. I live in Boston, which is one of the few walkable cities left, if possibly the only one. It's way more walkable than San Francisco. No, New York. New York is more walkable than Boston. Um, and and I go and I visit California, and I'm like, okay, I understand nice weather and some nice houses, but Jesus, like, why would anyone want to live there? You spend all of your
Yeah.
time in your car and in these giant parking lots to go to these same stores that you've gone to with the same selection all of the rest of the time. There's no social element. At least when I was a teenager, malls were actual social gathering places. And and they're not anymore. Like, I'm like, what is there other than I can afford a nice house with a beautiful view to recommend places like that? And the answer is, for a lot of people, they think that what they want is a big, nice house with a beautiful view. And I've had friends who have moved, miles and miles away from Boston because they're like, finally, I can afford the house that I want. And they live an hour away. And now they're like, well, why does no one ever come to visit me? And I'm like, because you have the house that you wanted, and to get that house that you wanted, you moved to some place that no one wants to go. Like,
Mhm.
like, what were you thinking? Because it really may be a trade-off, and the trade-off is: do you want to be around people and have a social life, or do you want to have a nice house that you live in alone, and if you want to see anyone, you have to get in your car and drive an hour? And and then, gee, we wonder why people have no relationships, no friends, and 80% of the country is depressed. Well, we actually know from research that the number one thing The number one thing that makes people happy is human relationships. We are wired that way. And we've created a physical infrastructure and a set of values and definitions of success that literally work exactly against that. And our technology, all of our technology these days is oriented around breaking in-person human connections. Don't watch the same movies as your friends so you have something to talk about. Here's your personalized recommendations for the next 25 things you should watch. Don't watch things a week at a time and talk to your friends about it. Just binge watch the entire series, and you can have a 5-minute conversation with your friend about the whole series. Like, don't listen to the same music as your friends. I mean, you should you should get recommendations from them, but here's your personalized playlist. Everything, we have said that personalization and the ability to consume things when you want, where you want, is the ultimate desirable thing, except for the fact, and again, this is the thing that nobody in high tech, at least as far as I can tell, has recognized, except for the fact that the social connection, which is what actually makes us happy, often used to come about because we couldn't consume these things personally. We had to consume them with friends or with strangers who we were having the same experience with, and we would meet someone in line and strike up a conversation, etc.
Steve is an interesting man, and I hope you enjoyed that conversation we had. We covered a lot of territory, obviously. And again, there's a link in the show notes to him on LinkedIn. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you have a terrific day. Be great.